You're listening to EdTech Heroes, a podcast that looks at how teachers in today's classrooms can use technology to improve student learning. In each episode, a hero in the world of education will share their story and discuss how innovation can influence the minds of the next generation. Let's jump in.
Hey y'all, and welcome to EdTech Heroes. I'm Nef, and today's guest is Heather Esposito. Heather is the district teacher technology coach for all 19 schools in the Cherry Hill, New Jersey school district. Yep. She has been providing support in the implementation of tech tools for several years and is also a reading specialist. Heather is also a recent graduate of the Screencastify Coaches Academy and contributed to the Screencastify Shorts event with tips that span all grades and content areas. Heather, welcome to EdTech Heroes.
Oh, thank you, Nef. I'm so excited to be a part of this and to share my experiences to help others.
Absolutely. So I know that you began as a teacher, and you and I have known each other for like 3 or 4 years, all the way back to your time in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And now you're in this awesome coaching role where you're helping lots of schools, elementaries, middle schools, high schools, to implement technology in their classroom. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what that transition was like? Sure. How did you go from being in the classroom to this technology coaching role?
Well, I would say it started about 8 or 9 years ago when I was getting my reading specialist certification. I had been teaching high school English since 2000, and I wanted to get my certification because I was helping those students who, were considered to be struggling in reading and writing. And also, by product, their engagement was lacking. As part of the research project that I did involved digital storytelling. Okay. It was one of those things where you take for granted your adeptness at technology, and a professor pointed it out to me. She said, "You're really good at technology. Why not harness technology to leverage your students' reading comprehension and add that engagement factor by having them produce something that was authentic?" That experience changed my whole view on learning and providing students an opportunity to express themselves in ways they never did before. So we took the Great Gatsby, which was really challenging for my students, turned it into Reader's Theater, where they rewrote the scripts, recorded it. And as I was assessing them along the way, they didn't realize it because they were having such a good time that their comprehension had increased. So I started taking that experience and then creating workshops for teachers. One of the requirements in New Jersey and a lot of school districts is professional development. And my school offers teachers the opportunity to do that. So came back from maternity leave and I thought, all these in-person after-school workshops, why don't we have online workshops? So I went and I asked, and I created the first online workshop for teachers, and then just my passion for student engagement and giving teachers these tools just kind of went from there. And we needed a technology coach, and it just so happened that, a pandemic and my new role coincided. And now instead of doing it as a side gig, it's my whole gig. And I get to help teachers and students in all of those 19 schools prepare themselves for what the future holds.
For sure. So now that this is your whole gig, how do you draw on your teaching experience to be a more effective coach?
So I always believed, and this was really fueled by some mentors that I have in my life, that pedagogy drives not only instruction, but it drives our choice of technology tools. Mm-hmm. It's not just tech for tech's sake. There are a lot of models out there. The SAMR model, the one I attribute a lot is the T3 framework from Sunny Magana, and how so much of the work that we have done up until the pandemic was translational. I remember the first time I found Google Forms. Wow, I can use a Google form instead of a pen and paper test. So my goal is really to help teachers find creative uses. Last year, a lot of it was a panic. I need to do something online. Now it's how can we really carefully select tools that foster engagement, foster student achievement, and engage students and prepare them for the future at the same time.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. So I'm really interested in your role as a coach and all of the awesome things that you have been doing. And I know that you were just a part of the Screencastify Coaches Academy, where you got to hang out with some other coaches from across the world. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your big takeaways from that experience and maybe a
Yeah.
few things that you were able to learn from your fellow coaches?
Yeah, it was such an awesome experience. As you mentioned, we've known each other for a while. Screencastify is my favorite tool. I always tell teachers it's not just the tool, it's a rudiment of flipped and blended learning. And
Hmm.
the fact that this is a platform that listens to educators and uses educators' knowledge and our work in the field to build a better platform. So coming together with teachers from around the world. I remember the first night there was a teacher who was up at like 3 o'clock in the morning because he was in another country, and seeing all the things that we have in common and all of our commitment to supporting teachers with technology in meaningful ways. It was just a wonderful chance to come together. One of the things that was shared towards the end was how to create teacher buy-in and
Hmm.
how to use Screencastify and planned videos to support buy-in with technology. One thing that's really lacking sometimes for teachers is time.
Hmm.
So if I can create a 3-minute how-to video on how to get started with something for the first time, that's going to really help a teacher out. That's really going to take the time away from the teacher trying to scramble when they're trying to grade and plan, and have this collection of videos at your fingertips that you can use. So that discussion was really, it really resonated with me, using Screencastify for teacher buy-in so that things don't seem as challenging as they could be without a coach creating a
Hmm.
video to support them. So that was a really meaningful conversation, part of our session. And then just hearing how other teachers plan to create planned videos, to create collections of PD for teachers in their district, was just really nice to hear the varied uses. And it was inspiring at the same time.
Yeah, certainly. And what's interesting is it feels very similar to the work that you did when you were back in the classroom of saying, hey, we have all these in person after school PDs, and for whatever reason, teachers may or may not be able to attend those. Let's take it online, right? And
Yeah.
that might have been a longer video. And then thinking a little bit about how we start to create shorter videos that
Right.
fill that same need. It's kind of this like on demand professional learning, which I think is really cool.
It is. And it also helps teachers realize that they can do the same thing for their students and for the students' parents in their classroom. If they create a library of videos, whether it's tips or reinforcing a skill or strategy, and then the work is done forever. You can keep it and catalog it and use it again and again. So not only is it me kind of using it as a coach, but it's also showing teachers how they can use it as well. And I've been really trying to encourage teachers to use the editing tools. We went over that with Olivia, like how to zoom in at certain things and how you can blur. And we talked about different cues that we make. We know we want to edit a part and go
Hmm.
back. Because I can't tell you how many teachers are like, oh my gosh, it took me 10 takes. I said, stop doing 10 takes. Use the editing tools. They're so wonderful. So that was a cool takeaway as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about some of the teachers in Cherry Hill. I know that y'all are doing some cool things. Just looking at your Twitter, I see some really, really awesome things that are happening in the classroom. Can you talk about maybe a few cool projects that have happened throughout the district this year?
Absolutely. I love sharing. As you know, I'm constantly tweeting out because I tell the teachers, you deserve to be celebrated for what you're accomplishing. And a big feeling at the beginning of the year is we created and collaborated so strongly last year to
Hmm.
create things. Now that we're back in the classroom for the time being, what things are a keep? What things can we build upon? And I've been helping teachers with that. One of the coolest things that came out of this is that we wanted to make assessment more authentic. There used to be a very standardized, objective assessment for math, for science, and language arts. Instead, we created a digital portfolio project for students. And this is for students grades 6 through 12. So all 3 middle schools, all 3 high schools are all involved in having their students create a Google site, which is a digital portfolio where students are self-selecting artifacts that show their best work, that show their process in learning. And then students are reflecting on their learning and their process. And I told the sixth graders that I worked with this year, I said, you guys are sitting here, you're 12 years old. This portfolio is going to follow you through the end of your senior year. How cool will it be to look back at yourself over time? And the other thing that really hit them, I said, you just made a website. They're like, we just made a website? I'm like, yes, it's your website. It's your portfolio. And then they're finding all these like animated GIFs for backgrounds and changing the color scheme. And it's authentic learning. They have an authentic purpose. They have an authentic audience. And they are self-appraising and self-reflecting and analyzing their own work as a result. And so that has been tremendous. Everyone just kept saying, like, why haven't we done something like this sooner? And it was a lot of work up front, but kids rose to the challenge. And a lot of the kids were even teaching some of the teachers some of the tricks that they learned. Right now, a lot of teachers have been asking me about podcasting. I worked with a sixth grade teacher this morning about creating like a debate podcast and how we could go about that. And then I had a third grade teacher ask me something similar about podcasting. So she's going to have certain groups of students create podcasts based off of their selected reading, their choice reading books. Teachers have listened to me when I told them less is more, even though I love all technology and all of the cool things you can do with a Google slide. So teachers are creating templates out of Google Slides. They're sharing and collaborating. They're having students engage in strategy instruction with Google slide decks. I'm a big fan of EduProtocols. One of my favorites is the Iron Chef, which basically takes a Google slide deck and creates a jigsaw activity out of it. Jigsaw, and I mentioned before, pedagogy leads practice, is one of the highest effect size strategies on student learning. And so kids were learning about the winter solstice. Some kids had stories, some kids had videos, some kids had informational texts. They worked together and within a course of 20 minutes had built an entire slide deck where they each took ownership of one piece of learning and put it all together and then got to speak to it. And that happened so quickly and again, authentically, that they were doing jigsaw in a Google slide and they had fun while they were doing it. So that's been really cool to see too.
Yeah, and I think that is so interesting because in all of the examples that you talked about, it seemed like there was some element of fun or students being bought in, and that being the prerequisite for engagement and for really, really good learning. We talked about that the last episode of the podcast where we talked about strategies for student engagement and lots of ways that teachers might be able to increase that. What do you think about student engagement and where does technology play a role in that?
So happy you asked me that question. And that goes back to an earlier question you asked me about the transition from like what I took as being a classroom teacher. And in my last couple of years in the classroom, I was really honored to be selected as a PLC coordinator. And with that role, with 7 other teachers in my school, we were working with the Quality Institute, which is a group that focuses on student voice and using student voice data, student voice feedback to help promote student achievement. One of the huge components of that is engagement. And when students are engaged, whether it's being curious and creative or they're trying something new for the first time, it directly impacts student achievement. And so part of the process of my coaching always involves the student. And when I come in and I do the planning with teachers, I often ask them, what did this old style, when you used to do this without tech, what was the impact on learning? Were students enjoying themselves? Were students engaged? And we look for ways to build upon that as we reimagine a new use with technology. When we're in the classroom, I always make it a point to ask students, do you like this? How is this impacting your learning? What can you do with this that you weren't able to do before? And on top of that, how could you use this outside of school or in another class? A lot of times we talk about making teaching relevant to our students. Relevant isn't just like, I want to relate to you or how do you relate to this? But it's taking a tool and thinking about how I can use it in the real world or in another class. So I remember when I first started using Screencastify with students in my English class, a couple weeks went by and a Spanish teacher came to me and said, Tony taught us how to use Screencastify in Spanish for something we could do in a Spanish project. I said, that's relevance. He became the teacher, he took ownership, and he taught others what he was doing in English for Spanish class. I thought that was phenomenal. Talking with a fifth grade teacher last year, he was using Screencastify and his students were practicing fluency and creating audiobooks. They were also using the recordings to practice vocabulary, pretending that they were teaching first graders. Using those two activities, I met with the students and half of them had created their own YouTube channel now with their use of Screencastify to show gaming or whatever it might be. So again, relevance. They took something that was involved in learning and now they're using it outside of the classroom to share their passions. So that's student voice and student engagement. It's paramount to everything.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that you actually ask students that question.
Well, all the time.
I think as teachers can sometimes be a little scary to ask a student, are you enjoying this? Because they might come back and say, actually, I am not. This is awful, right?
I know. And you know what? You know what? It does happen. And when that happens, and I say, well, what could we do differently? That happened one time, the way I was rolling out a project with students. And she said, you're telling us too many details all at once. Because I asked her, she's like, I'm getting confused because I kind of said, this is what we're going to be doing step by step. She's like, we were talking and we think that you should just tell us what we need to do the next couple days. I said, that's so great. If I hadn't asked her, I could have lost the connection and the communication with the whole class. And so I asked her, she answered, she told me what I could do differently. I did it. And I made sure they knew that I listened to them. One thing for us to say, I listen to my students, but your students don't know that you listen to them until you let them know that they've been heard. It's a crucial component. You have to let them know, and when you do that, you close that feedback loop and they know that you've listened and you heard them and you're doing something as a result, they're going to rise to the occasion and surprise you in a lot of ways, positively.
Yeah, certainly. I love that, right? It's like, okay, I have physically heard you, but in order to actually feel that, you have to see some sort of change. And if you think about it in our interpersonal relationships, that's the same, right? Like, you can tell your partner, hey, I need more help around the house, but until you see them washing those dishes, you don't feel heard.
Yeah.
So
and that's why it's so cool to offer kids choices. And technology has really afforded more choices. So if a kid wants to get up and physically perform something, they can, but then maybe a quieter kid can record his or herself and play it back. That's particularly helpful with English language learners to be able to hear themselves. Or maybe instead of doing an old-fashioned poster, I can do some sort of graphic design or mind map. So it's giving kids a choice, inviting them to kind of share in the creation and the production of student work.
Yeah, certainly. And I think in lots of ways, choice can also breed engagement. Because if you've made the explicit choice to engage in this particular form of assessment or this particular form of learning, then that can be enough to get you really invested in the lesson.
Yes, definitely. Choice is key. Choice and engagement go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about something else dope that you put out relatively recently, which was your presentation for Screencastify Shorts, which is available free. We'll link it down in case anybody wants to take a look at it. You talked about a lot of things. You talked about SEL, you talked about QR codes, college entrance, world languages. It was a whole lot. So can you talk a little bit about why it might be important to have tools that are going to work regardless of the subject matter? And I think you've already kind of started to talk about this, but tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, this goes back to what I talked about with relevance, but I think what teachers experience, and this came out of a result of a workshop. I gave a workshop that was focused more on the student end of Screencastify, not just creating tutorials, but things that you could do to have students produce with Screencastify. And I was just blown away by the ideas that teachers were coming up with. Once we said it's not just a teacher tool, but it's a student tool, the SEL example came about. A teacher at one of the middle schools has a gardening club. And he talked about how students could use Screencastify to create videos about gardening tips, sharing their favorite plant, or, it could be a how-to. It could just be a little kind of vlogging experience, and kind of creating a platform for them to share out with the community. The guidance counselors were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I haven't been harnessing this. I have hundreds of students I have to meet with. I can create a Screencastify submit link, and students can submit questions to me, and I can give them instantaneous feedback. So as we came together, and this was all grades, from preschool teachers through 12th grade and other staff like guidance counselors and assistants, thinking about and learning from each other of how one use in the classroom could also translate to another use. One of our top creators is a guidance counselor. She uses Screencastify for everyday morning meetings. And in the morning meetings, they talk about it's National Whatever Day. She gives some SEL tips, social and emotional learning. They reinforce different positive aspects of life. And other guidance counselors in the group were like, oh my gosh, I could start using that. And teachers were like, this is a great way to send out messages to my students. One teacher created GIF stickers. She's like, I can't keep up with the physical stickers. So she used Screencastify's GIF creator. She's holding stickers and waving them around. And I said, well, you teach 5th grade. I taught 11th grade. I can tell you that 11th graders like stickers just as much as 5th graders. So everybody here should be creating GIF stickers for their students. So it really just was so cool. And that's when I decided I have to celebrate these folks and everything that they're sharing, because it's truly a testament of how one tool can be utilized in so many different ways, not just with remote or hybrid, but moving forward to help not even just students, but parents.
Yeah.
Creating a how-to to navigate Class JoJo, one teacher did. Here's how you navigate our online grading system. So now those things exist, and they don't have to say again and again and again, this is how you do it, because I can just point out a video for you to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And I love this aspect of video being able to transcend our physical classrooms, whether it's that example of a teacher creating something for a parent to watch at home or at work or whenever they might need it, or what I think is a really cool example of this gardening club being able to create this vlog that maybe is viewed by other gardening clubs, or maybe I need to give it a watch to figure out how I can keep my plants alive. But I want to hear a little bit more about what it's like to have what happens in our classrooms permeate the community. What does that do for teachers? What does that do for students?
I think that even though last year was really challenging, I always try to look at my glass as full, or look at the silver lining of things. And the silver lining that came out of it was that teachers collaborated more than ever before. They not only collaborated with their fellow teachers, they collaborated with teachers across the country. I kept telling my friends, you need a PLN. You go on Twitter, you're going to connect with people who have similar interests. Join Wakelet, find ideas, connect with each other, connect with teachers. So we have 12 elementary schools. Connect with grade level partners in other elementary schools. And that happened fast and furiously out of a need, but now it's something that has stuck. And that air of collaboration still exists. And it exists between parents and teachers and students, administrators and teachers. It goes every which way. And I think that has been tremendous. And the fact that I get to go to all 19 schools, if I see something cool happening in one school, I can share that with a teacher. So I'm celebrating something, but also helping a teacher with an idea that he or she might not have thought of beforehand. So the collaboration that came out of last year was amazing, and it was necessary, and it still has not left us. And if I have anything to do about it, it will never leave us, because it is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes the best professional development that you can get is from the teacher down the hall or the teacher across the world,
Yeah.
understanding how they have been able to interact with students. When I was in the classroom, we sometimes had eighth grade meetings, and you would sit there with the math teacher, and their curriculum obviously was completely different, but what we shared was the same students. And being able to say, oh, this has really been engaging. I'm thinking, okay, how do I adapt that for language arts?
Yeah.
How do I like build on that fun and that engagement that that teacher has been able to get in their classroom? So I think you're right that when we collaborate more, we are all better off. Whether we are the one sharing the idea or the one getting the idea, we all have something uniquely to gain from that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And now with the more ease of technology, and
Mhm.
people are less fearful of technology, the sharing is faster. The sharing and the collaborating in real time doesn't have to be as scheduled as
Mm.
it used to be, because now we have these collaboration tools embedded in the technology we use to help facilitate that connection.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. So you shared a lot of really cool ideas,
I
but
have lots of ideas.
and you do, right? Like it, y'all. If you are not following Heather on Twitter yet, it's the place to be. Tons and tons of ideas there. But before we wrap up our discussion, I have a very important question that I think lots of folks will get a lot out of. What are good ways for teachers to make the most of their coaches? So, how might they be able to best interact with those folks to make sure that they are getting the best experience possible?
I think that coaching is a process, and it can be done in a lot of different ways. I always start off by asking teachers what they feel comfortable doing. Some teachers want to do everything face to face, and that's fine. Some people are time crunched and want to do a quick Zoom because they have a quick question. But when I can do a full process and teachers feel supported from planning to implementation to reworking, I feel that that's where it's at. And I think teachers and coaches need to really invest in that full cycle. I often start with, what is an area of need? What is something that you want to improve? Sometimes the teachers come to me and say, I need to make this PDF writable. And I say, okay, let's figure out how we can best do that. And a lot of teachers are really surprised when they hear that I will come in and co-teach with them.
Mm.
Because a lot of times you go to a PD or hear something, or like, that looks really cool, but I don't know if I feel comfortable trying it for the first time myself. So I've done that in so many schools now. I've helped a teacher with the planning, talking about how it would be implemented, but I'll say, if you want me to co-teach with you, I will, or I can lead it the first time, or you can lead it and I'll just kind of be there in the background if you need my help.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing about that, and I remind them, is having that extra person there is going to give them a chance for that student voice piece to happen. Because if they're teaching, I can go around and kind of gauge the student engagement and see what the students are doing and how they're feeling, or vice versa. Because a lot of times teachers are like, I never have the chance to actually stop and see what the students are doing in real time. So the coaching experience is really a co-teaching experience in a lot of ways. And now I have a handful of teachers where I come in regularly. They're like, Heather, what's the newest, coolest thing, and can we do it? Bless you. So, it really is a matter of meeting teachers where they are, knowing that you're not there to judge. I always say, and I've been teaching for 22 years, and it took me a while to realize this, that kindness is the best classroom management. It's also the best way to approach adult learners, is being kind, being calm, and being open. Never coming in being like, I'm the expert, you're doing it all wrong. It's meeting teachers where they are and making them feel comfort in having that person who can assist them in their journey.
Yeah, certainly. That makes a lot of sense. So, thinking about how to co-teach and use a coach not only in terms of implementation, but also in that planning piece. Sounds like
Yes.
it is incredibly important. So yeah, I think all of those tips are going to do wonders for teachers who are thinking about how they might be able to approach instructional coaches or technology coaches who are there to support them.
Yeah.
So final question, what are some of your favorite online resources to share with teachers?
Other than Screencastify?
Other than Screencastify.
Okay, so Screencastify is my favorite. Everyone knows that. But lately, I've really been enjoying, and I actually partnered up with a good friend of mine. She's a librarian at one of the middle schools, and we led an online workshop on Canva. Like Screencastify, I found that Canva translates really well to a variety of content areas, grade levels, and they've really just ramped up their game. And not only that, it's free. And so we did a workshop with Canva, and as a result, teachers are now, there's a middle school teacher who was using Canva for a project, and instead of an old-fashioned report or whatever, the kids created infographics. And I thought, how cool is that? They're really synthesizing what they're learning and presenting it graphically. So I love that kids, are now using graphic design. It looks like social media posts, or it looks like an event flyer. So kind of taking, again, that authentic piece of learning, making something feel real, is something that really is provided with Canva. So that's my number 2 right now underneath Screencastify. And the other tool, I think I started mentioning it briefly, isn't a platform, but it's a strategy, it's a framework, and it's EduProtocols. A couple years ago, I think it was, or a year and a half ago, I joined up with Dr. Sunny Magana and Marlena Heber, and they ran an EduProtocol T3 framework for coaches and teachers, and talked about how EduProtocols aren't just activities, but they're strategies embedded into technology. And so I mentioned the Iron Chef, that's Jigsaw. Cyber Sandwich is Pair Share. Sketch and Tell helps students visualize and then articulate their learning. So, and all of that can be done in a Google slide. So if I tell one teacher something, I'm like, you know what, Google Slides are free. You don't have to become a member. They're part of Google. And you can create so many meaningful strategy-based instructional lessons with Google Slides. So yeah, Screencastify, Canva, and EduProtocols via Google Slides. That rounds out the 3.
All right, I love it. Those are a pretty hard-hitting 3. I obviously love Screencastify, but I am a huge Canva fan, and EduProtocols are also super dope. I'll definitely go check those out. Heather, I really appreciate you joining EdTech Heroes. And listeners, be sure to follow Heather on Twitter. She is at Mrs. H. Esposito. I am your host, Nef Dukes, and I am looking forward to seeing y'all next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of EdTech Heroes, presented by Screencastify.